Welcome in the guru, Travis Reier, host of Southern Fried Sports, which follows my program here on Tide 100.9, and, of course, senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. Christian Harris going to start at that inside linebacker as a true freshman. I mean, Saban said it. There have been some special ones that have done it. Hightower, Orlando McClain. I think Mosley started some as a freshman, but it's still fairly rare. But is he trending in that direction to beat out Markel Benton for that spot next to Dylan Moses?
It certainly appears that way, based on, again, what you saw Saturday or what you heard Saturday, both pre-scrimmage, during the scrimmage, Nick Saban post-scrimmage. That would seem to be the trend. Now, media viewing period last night, we go out there and lo and behold, he's down on the field with what appeared to be a tweaked knee. It didn't seem to be anything overly serious, but it required the attention of Jeff Allen. It wasn't just one of the other trainers that were checking him out. They wrapped him up, taped him up a little bit. He got up and did some lateral movement, some things to sort of test it and see where it was at. I'm not exactly sure where that went from there. We were leaving at about that time, but assuming that he is healthy and good to go, it's absolutely moving that direction. In fact, the guy next up behind Christian Harris and Dylan Moses might very well be a true freshman in Shane Lee.
Wow. Saban said Saturday that player safety is number one. They do everything they can to increase the opportunities for players to stay healthy, whether it's the sleep test and all the different things that do with diet and nutrition. But injuries happen. DJ Dale, they've been very careful with him. LeBron Ray, they've been very careful with him. Both those guys, you think back in time for Duke, so we have that starting interior defensive line of Raekwon Davis, DJ Dale, and LeBron Ray. You think that's who we're going to see against the Blue Devils, all those guys together in the starting lineup?
Yeah, we'll see in the next couple of days. LeBron Ray has been moving towards that. He's kind of rejoined Raekwon Davis in individual drills anyway, as a guy that looks to be moving that way. I don't know how much team-type work he's done to this point. DJ Dale is trying to get back into that mix, coming off the knee injury. He was out there last night with those guys in individual drills with a pretty good-sized brace on the knee that he tweaked. So, you would think still, 10, 11 days away from kickoff that they're in that mix. But I think at this point you're probably going with the approach that you're going to play a lot of guys against Duke. And, of course, partially not from the coach's perspective, but from ours, you should be able to. In a game that you should be able to command and control. But even if it were a much, much superior opponent, I think Alabama would probably be in that situation of outside Raekwon Davis. You're looking at playing hopefully DJ Dale, hopefully LeBron Ray, but then also guys like Fedarian Mathis, Justin Aboigbe, the true freshman. You get into Christian Barmore territory. You got Stephon Wynn in a boot right now. So I think those true freshmen could be a big part of the storyline. Vita Musika has been around a year as a junior college transfer. I wouldn't discount just about anybody from a scholarship lineman perspective as potentially seeing the field in that game against Duke.
Associated Press preseason top 25. You remember when we were growing up, boy, you looked forward to that with a lot of anticipation. It's not as important anymore with the playoff, but still it carries weight. Some thoughts on that, Travis. Were you surprised to know that Clemson, has never been preseason number one before in the AP top 25 until yesterday?
That was a surprise to me. Although, when you really think about national championship teams, at Clemson, I guess in the AP era, the polls era, 81 under Danny Ford, I guess at the time. That wasn't a team that I recall hearing a lot about going into that season. That was right in the middle of the Herschel Walker run there at Georgia and Penn State. Obviously, Alabama was still very much in the mix at that time under Paul Bear Bryant. So I could see maybe slingshotting drafting. Maybe I don't have that information right in front of me, but it would make sense given the time, when Clemson's been really dominant. And then with Danny Ford into the 80s as well, mid-80s, late 80s, had some really, really good teams. But there was a pretty good gap between the Ford era and then, what we've seen under Dabo here in the last 4 or 5 years. So, from that perspective, maybe it's a little bit of a surprise, but then again, maybe not.
Travis, as we know, Bama's been ranked number one at some point during the AP Top 25 regular season poll every season since 2008, which blows my mind. Starting out 2 this week. Clearly, they have to play well to take care of their business and probably need either a Clemson loss or a Clemson near loss to have a chance to get into that position during the regular season. I think most people are just assuming that Clemson and Alabama both get in the playoff. Out of those 2 teams, who do you think has the most potential to come up short?
Of Clemson and Alabama?
Yeah, to get into the playoff.
Oh, God, Alabama. I mean, I know Alabama's regular season schedule, doesn't have the 27 Yankees on it 3 or 4 times. But when I look at Clemson, Texas A&M at home in week 2, you're going to bank on that. South Carolina on the road, Thanksgiving weekend. I don't know about that. So, there are some wild cards, I guess you could point to on every schedule. Maybe Syracuse on the road was a little bit of a kryptonite for that Clemson team a couple of years ago, perhaps. But no, I think it's and then when you factor in the conference championship games, I mean, nobody has a clue who Clemson's going to see on the other side because, Louisville and Florida State aren't much right now, but at least they're in the same division with Clemson. And you get on the other side, you're talking Pitt, Duke, Virginia Tech, Virginia.
A lot of bad teams.
I mean, it's like a neutral site game. It's like Alabama Duke in Atlanta, except it's a conference championship game. Look at it that way, And so, that's what Clemson has on its plate. I think it's going to be much tougher for Alabama just because of the road games. South Carolina earlier in the season, I think, is going to be tougher than going to South Carolina to end the season. Once attrition and some of the stuff that comes with a full season hits a team like South Carolina. Texas A&M on the road is going to be a lot tougher than Texas A&M at home for Clemson. Even LSU in Tuscaloosa, roster-wise, is easily a tougher matchup than anything Clemson will see in the regular season. And then that's before you go to Auburn that same weekend that Clemson goes to South Carolina. So hard not to look at those 2 scenarios and think Alabama doesn't have the tougher road to hoe.
Yeah, an amazing stat here in the AP poll era, only 3 teams. Northwestern in 68, Minnesota in 72, and Mizzou in 75 had faced the top 3 teams in the preseason poll. A&M and South Carolina are going to do it in the same year, and they're from the same conference. How about that one? Hey, let me ask you this, Travis. 4 teams in the top 10, 6 in the top 16, but that's it. The Big Ten actually has 7 teams in the top 25. They have one more. Is the SEC a top-heavy league?
I think you could make that argument this year. I mean, when you look at the 2 divisions and you see Georgia and Florida in the East, Alabama, and LSU in the West, although I tend to think Auburn's going to be better than some people are thinking. But, I think once you get beyond, those top 4 teams or so, there's certainly question marks. I mean, you look at Auburn with the quarterback transition, a team that lost 5 games in the regular season a year ago, sort of inexplicably. And, of course, that's typically when Auburn rebounds the best. So we'll see. A&M, Jimbo Fisher is recruiting at a very high level right now. So I think the future bodes well for Jimbo and the Aggies, but I don't know if right now, A&M is that kind of team, although we're seeing them, as a top 12, top 15 type preseason team. So, those are the primary candidates. And then it comes down to, can Mississippi State, kind of slip into the back end of that top 25? What about South Carolina? Can Kentucky back up what it did a year ago and maintain that consistency of the last 3 seasons under Mark Stoops? Those are sort of the wild card teams I look at because I just don't really have expectations for Vanderbilt, for Arkansas, for Ole Miss. Ole Miss might be a little bit better than we're thinking. Missouri's kind of a wild card in all this too, with the schedule being what it is. Kelly Bryant coming in there at quarterback, there's a real possibility, and I think Missouri will be a top 25 team as we get into September in due part because of that schedule. Where Missouri will be fully revealed is November. That's when things really pick up for Mizzou. So, there are some teams that could factor into that. I'm not sure Tennessee's quite ready for that yet, especially along the lines of scrimmage. But those are sort of the wild card teams I would expect in that range.
All right, Travis, we're running out of time, but I want to get you to comment on Jalen as expected being named the starter at Oklahoma with his championship pedigree, 28 starts at UA, the improvement he took last year under Dan Enos as a pocket passer and now working under a quarterback guru in Lincoln Riley, his head coach. What are you expecting from him this year in terms of not just leading that team, but in terms of his passing? And do you think we'll see enough from him that he'll be in the Heisman conversation late in November?
Yeah, I've got no reason to think that Jalen won't put up numbers in that offense, maybe even more so with his legs than what we saw from Baker Mayfield or Kyler Murray. But I do think he made improvements as a passer, especially over the last year. I think in due part to, there's been a lot of credit given, to his coaching for sure in the last year or two at Alabama. I think Tua Tagovailoa pushed Jalen Hurts to become a better passer in those 2 years they were together as well. So I think that'll continue, and I think it comes down to the Texas game for Oklahoma. Jalen's legacy at OU will largely come down to that morning kickoff, typically in Dallas, Texas. If OU takes care of Texas, and then perhaps again in the Big 12 championship game, he will have fulfilled everything everyone's sort of expecting from him.
Looking forward to a great college football season. It's almost here. I wanted to ask you about Florida and Miami, but we're out of time. But I know you'll be covering that and other topics on Southern Sports.
We'll be getting to it in just a minute.